Hey everyone, welcome back to Metaverse Entangled. I'm Amrish, and today we have a really special guest joining us. Our guest today is Hassan Saleem, a PhD student in theoretical physics at SUNY Albany, working on problems in string theory and conformal field theory. Alongside his research, he is also the creator and host of Phymaths Podcast, where he has conversations about physics, mathematics, education, and advanced ideas in theoretical physics, and also shares lectures on graduate level physics topics. On a personal note, I would like to highlight the fact that during my first year in college, Phymaths Podcast was actually one of the channels that inspired me to start this YouTube podcast. It was one of the few places where you could see discussions with many well-known physicists from around the world. In fact, if you look at some of the early interfaces of Metaverse Entangled, the format and even the style of questions were heavily inspired by Phymaths Podcast. So it's truly a pleasure to welcome him here today. Hassan, thank you so much for joining us on Metaverse Entangled. So, hello Hassan, welcome to the podcast. My pleasure having you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Before we start, I would like to thank you personally because it was after watching your Phymaths that kind of motivated me to start my own YouTube channel as well. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. I'm glad to know that.
Yeah. So could you take a couple of minutes in talking about what do you work on currently?
So I currently work on string compactifications of non-supersymmetric strings. In the popular science, where people mostly talk about superstring theory, which means that you have string theory with supersymmetry, right? And the reason why people do that is that these five string theories that people talk about in popular science were the candidates for the theory that unifies all the forces. Um, and one reason why people study one reason, there are other reasons too, but one reason why people study supersymmetric string theories is that supersymmetric string theories tend to come with, without, problematic particles, which are called tachyons, right?
Right.
Um, Now, the thing is that it's not the case that if you don't have supersymmetry, then you can't get rid of tachyons, right? So there are some non-supersymmetric string theories where you don't get tachyons, right? There are only three of them that we know of in 10 dimensions, and one of them is called O16 heterotic, and there are two more. O16 heterotic theory doesn't have open strings, but the other two have open strings. So one needs to investigate that if you compactify these theories from 10 dimensions to lower dimensions, what would you get? Can you get stable backgrounds? Can you get anything that looks like our world? Can you build reliable vacua or reliable theories out of these 10-dimensional non-supersymmetric string theories? So that's what I work on.
Nice. String theory initially was proposed as an attempt to unify gravity, but nowadays many researchers do it for its mathematical richness or its application in other areas. Do you think that attributes to the fact that the theory is a failure, or do you think it's still a valuable pursuit in its current form?
It's not a failure, I won't say that. But the thing is that some people, mainly mathematicians, but some physicists as well, they have been studying string theory because of its utility towards mathematics. And I think that will continue to be the case, whether or not we are able to build, a reliable vacuum state or reliable state that looks like our universe from this. Um, but when it comes to the physics of the string theory, I would say that some of the problems that we have with string theory are not specific to string theory. Those problems would be there with any theory of quantum gravity. For example, one problem in quotation marks with string theory is that it seems to be the case that if you want to directly test string theory, then you would need to go to energies which are not accessible to us. So you will need to go to energies which are like 10 to the power 15 times higher than our currently accessible energy scales. Now, that fact is not specific to string theory. This is the case because the scale at which gravitational interaction becomes significant or as big as the other interactions is the Planck scale, right? That fact is independent of string theory. Even if you didn't know string theory, you could have predicted this thing. You can just predict that using some basic dimensional analysis and some knowledge of QFT, I would say.
Right.
So it means that if you want to test loop quantum gravity directly or any other theory of quantum gravity directly, you would need to go to those energies. So it's not specific to a string theory, but I think a lot of people have made this mental picture in the minds of a lot of people that this problem is specific to string theory. This is not a string theory problem. This is a quantum gravity problem. So in that sense, I would say that it's not a failure. I mean, we could have known that before we knew anything about string theory. When it
Hmm.
comes to indirect tests, I would say that some people are trying to get indirect tests. There have been some indirect successes. For example, um, in the mid 2000s, there was an experiment in RIC, I think, which is a relativistic heavy ion collider. Uh,
Hmm.
they studied the viscosity of something called quark gluon plasma. And it turns out that the viscosity of quark gluon plasma behaves very much like the viscosity of quark gluon plasma as predicted by holography. And it turns out
Right.
that holography was the only thing at that time that
Hmm.
could produce the correct prediction. And no, holography doesn't mean that, so sorry, a successful holography doesn't mean that string theory is correct, but it increases your credence in these methods.
Right. I see. When you're talking about loop quantum gravity, does it also have the same applications into other areas in mathematical richness as compared to string theory, or is it different?
I'm not an expert on quantum gravity, but I do know that the whole field of spin networks is a very interesting field. In the sense of mathematics, it was, I think,
Hmm.
one of the people who came up with this idea is Roger Penrose.
Hmm.
And yeah, as far as I know, and I'm not an expert, so don't quote me on that, but I think spin networks is a very rich mathematical structure.
Right. So, how has research in quantum gravity evolved with time? Are the paradigms to which we approach the problem, is there a change in it? Like
I
off
think
late,
there have
like
been a lot
in
of
the,
changes. Yeah, go on, please.
yeah, like in every decade, like how is the paradigm changing?
So I think in the last 10 years, there have been some things which are studied more as compared to the things that were studied in 2000s or early 2010s. So for example, in 2000s, a lot of people were studying string compactifications and trying to realize some scenarios that people had come up with. For example, there was a scenario called KKLT, which came in
Hmm.
early 2000s. In a KKLT scenario, which was proposed by four people, I think most of them were from Stanford.
Hmm.
Um, they proposed that you may be able to build a de Sitter solution. Now, de Sitter solution is a solution that has a positive cosmological constant because it seems to be the case that in our universe we have a small but positive cosmological constant. So, and we know that string theory famously has a problem with uh, obtaining positive cosmological constant, which is a reliable, solution. So people were trying to realize KKLT, and through their constructions. So that was most of the research. Yeah, in string up activations. But now, if you look at 2010s, I think in the mid of 2010s, people. So there were some researchers who were working on something called the Swampland program
Hmm.
in the second half of 2000s. But since 2015, I would say this research in the swampland program has increased dramatically. Now, what is the swampland program? Swampland program says that, a swampland program asks the question that if you wrote down all the low energy descriptions, which are called effective field theories, then which low energy descriptions are consistent with gravity as you go to higher energies? And if you can find a low energy description which is not consistent with gravity as you go to higher energies, then we say that this low energy description or this EFT or effective field theory as we call them is in the swampland. But
Hmm.
if you do have a low energy description which is consistent with gravity as we go to higher energies, then it's in the landscape. So you either any effective field theory is either in the landscape or in the swampland. Now, what the swampland program tends to do is that can you come up with some conjectures that we can test at low energies, and those conjectures should tell you that which effective field theory would be consistent with gravity. And people have come up with a lot of conjectures like that, and they have
Hmm.
tested those conjectures on a large number of examples that come from string theory. So swampland program is something that has been very active since the last 10 years, I would say. But it was mildly active in 2000s, the late 2000s. But for the last 10 years, swampland program has been a big thing. And apart from that, there is another thing that people have been studying for the last 10 years, and it's called generalized symmetries. So generalized symmetries are just I mean, it's in the name. So they're like generalized notions of what symmetries mean. When we say symmetries, we normally mean that that you have a group of symmetries, for example, which means that any symmetry can be undone, right? You have an
Right.
inverse symmetry as well. So
Hmm.
generalized symmetries say that, well, you don't need to have an inverse, for example. You don't need to have a group of symmetries. You may have a category, something like that. So there are non-invertible symmetries, for example. And there's another, notion in which you can generalize symmetries. They are still invertible, but it just means that the objects which are associated to these symmetries are of different dimensions as compared to the ordinary symmetries that we studied. So that has been a very active area for the last 10 years. Well, actually more than 10 years, 12 years now. So um, and there are as I told you earlier, that some people were trying to realize KKLT. It was very hard to realize, but some people are still trying to realize KKLT. So there was some progress in that direction in 2019 to 2021
Right.
by this group in Cornell University, where they you know realized the first step to some extent. And realizing the second step is harder, but some of the people that I've talked to, they said that they were trying to implement the second step as well. Uh, so the research in this direction has changed over the years drastically because of some of the advancements that we saw in the last 20 years, I would say.
Right. So, how is artificial intelligence changing the landscape of theoretical physics research, or to be specific, string theory research as well?
So I would say that um, most people that I know of, they say that they use artificial intelligence to learn things.
Hmm.
So I mean, uh, most people that I have talked to, I would say all the people that I
Yeah,
have
even I
talked
had a
to, and those
podcast
people,
with Dr. Chitrang Mudia a couple of weeks ago, and he was mentioning the same. He just uses ChatGPT like or AI like how a normal person would use it. He does not use any build any neural nets to solve computation or something like that.
no, no, because I think his work is not something that where you would use neural networks. So probably that's why
Hmm.
he's not using them. But most people whose area is theoretical physics research, they use ChatGPT, for example, to learn things that they would take longer to learn if ChatGPT was not there. Because
Hmm.
ChatGPT is really good, and not just ChatGPT, Claude and Gemini. I mean, I have a colleague who doesn't use ChatGPT. She uses Gemini. So
Hmm.
people use these AI models to learn things because these AI models are good at teaching you. That's one thing where they're using it. So, I mean, someone may think that it's not part of research, but it is. It is because you have to learn things if you want to do
Hmm.
research. That's one thing. But apart from that, there are some problems where people are using, neural networks to solve problems which we didn't have a lot of insight on. So one problem that I can give an example for is to construct metrics over Calabi-Yau manifolds. So
Hmm.
when it comes to Calabi-Yau manifolds, which are very important for string theory compactifications, we don't understand the closed form of the metrics on those manifolds, right? But machine learning techniques are allowing us to understand how the metrics on these Calabi-Yau manifolds work. And people have written whole libraries for figuring out the metrics on these Calabi-Yau manifolds. So there are numerical metrics which are available now
Hmm.
on different Calabi-Yau manifolds. So that's one area where I would say neural networks have done some work. Apart from that, there was a recent paper where it was, you know, claimed, and Andreas Strominger was one of the authors of that paper, um, where it was claimed that the idea came from ChatGPT. Now, people try to make even OpenAI tried to make the case that this paper is, kind of conceived by ChatGPT, but that's not true because I think the main idea was conceived by human beings, but ChatGPT came up with a conjecture, and that conjecture was checked by again humans, not ChatGPT. So you can, use ChatGPT. Again, I'm saying ChatGPT again and again because I use ChatGPT mostly, and after
Hmm.
that I use Claude,
Hmm.
but other people may use Gemini, for example. So you can use ChatGPT to be your assistant in research. It's good at that, but you can't expect it to come up with ideas and not make mistakes.
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes it makes very blatant mistakes, I would say, but it's facilitating researchers to condense some of the work that they had to do on their own. For example, literature survey is one thing where you can use these AI models to help you. One more thing that I would say is that there is an idea since 2008, I would say. That idea is quite interesting. So it's called neural network QFT correspondence. And there you can actually study neural networks using the
Hmm.
techniques of physics, which is very interesting. So
Oh, nice.
you can make the case that any neural network corresponds to a QFT with scalars, and different properties of the neural networks correspond to different properties of the QFT. For example,
Hmm.
the threshold that you use, in neural network, the precision that you use, you can
Yeah.
see it as a cutoff for the QFT, the
Hmm.
RG cutoff.
Hmm.
The input can be seen as a field in the QFT, for example. And there was another correspondence I forgot, but there is literally a whole group
Hmm.
in, I think, Northwestern or Northeast, I think Northeastern University, under Jim Halverson, and there are some other people in his group as well, and they specialize in this area. There is a paper by that group in 2008, I
Hmm.
would say, by Halverson and some other people. So you can study neural networks, and
Yeah, I
study
still
the
remember seeing a
application.
YouTube video as well, like which gives a very beautiful illustration of the physics behind AI or the physics behind neural networks. I don't remember the name exactly, but that kind somewhat like very similarly revolves to the idea around which you were talking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I think there's another physicist who I interviewed in for my podcast. His name is Harold Urban. So
Mm.
he also does some work there. But the pioneers of this idea are in Northeastern University, but under
Right.
Halverson.
Mm. Yeah,
So
I
there's
keep
some other areas
asking.
where I would say.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. I keep asking this question to my guests. Like, in one of the podcasts, like in one of the interactions between OpenAI CEO Sam Altman and Professor David Dush, Sam had asked David Dush that, like, if one day an advanced model could come and solve quantum gravity with an, provided it gives an ample explanation of how it was able to arrive to the conclusion, would Professor David Dush accept the so-called AGI or AI supremacy? And do you think that one day some model like that could, an advanced model could solve quantum gravity?
I think, well, again, what do you mean by solving? Because I think quantum gravity would be solved if there is some prediction that can be made that can be tested. Because if that's not a criterion, then I would say that it's already been solved by string theory. Then what are you asking for? If
So
you need to
what,
make a prediction that can
yeah,
be tested.
we what is basically saying is like what all the attempts to unify gravity, like what all the frameworks try to achieve, and what to if an advanced model could kind of resolve all the inconsistency which the frameworks propose. So would you accept AI supremacy?
So the thing is that, again, supremacy in what? If you say that, okay, it's better than us in solving this problem, sure. Again, if it solves quantum gravity, I would still need to understand how it solved it, because in the 1970s, when computers were becoming more ubiquitous, and there was a famous theorem in mathematics called the four-color theorem, which was
Hmm.
solved by using computers, right? So what happened
Right.
is that human beings listed all the cases, and they need to check all the cases and see if the four-color theorem is violated anywhere. So they checked it by using a computer. And at that time, there's an interview of Michael Atiyah, which was part of a BBC documentary in 90s or 80s probably. And in that interview, he was talking about this proof of four-color theorem. And Michael Atiyah said something there, which is about mathematics, but I think that's true for physics too. And what he said is that we are not in the business of mathematics to get answers. We want to
Hmm.
understand, and
Right.
we just don't want answers. So if some AI model can give us the solution to quantum gravity, I still want to understand, because we are not in the
Hmm.
business of physics to get
Right.
answers. I mean, we are not working in industry. In
Hmm.
industry, understanding is not the first priority. The first
Hmm.
priority is to get answers and deliver the product. But in academia, you want to understand. We are not here to
Right.
get answers. We want to understand.
Right. Thank you, Hassan. That was a good answer. It kind of changed my perspective of looking at this problem. So, next
That's
question
good.
is, correct me if I'm wrong. String theory research is mainly abstract more than solving problems. So that is, I consider that to be a mathematician's mode mainly. So are most of the research in string theory collaborative? But on the other hand, I've heard like eminent people like Dr. Ashok Sen say that he attacks problem in string theory from a completely physics perspective. So could you throw some more light on this?
Yeah, so I think some different people have different styles. There are some people who are very, mathematical. For example, take Edward Witten. Now,
Hmm.
Edward Witten, I don't think that I can name many people who understand mathematics more than Ed Witten, right?
Hmm.
But if you read his papers, they are super understandable. He doesn't try to hide, things in mathematical jargon. He tries to keep everything as clean as he can, and he tries to, talk through the lens of physics when he's writing a physics paper. And there are some people who are just, solving mathematical problems, and they do abstract more because they're pursuing a different goal. For example, if there is someone who is trying to understand the properties of some geometrical space, right?
Hmm.
And they're not don't care about physics, but they're using physics as, a helping tool, then you may call them string theory researchers because they are using string theory, but their goal is not to understand physics. Their goal is to understand the properties of this geometrical space, right? So those people, of course, they will abstract a lot. But you will see that, for example, you mentioned Ashok Sen, that he tries to attack problems using a physics perspective. You will see a lot of people like that. For example, have you, I don't know if you have, but have you ever read a paper by Leonard Susskind?
No, I've read his books on the theoretical minimum, but not
Sure. Yeah.
papers.
Okay. But
Hmm.
even if you even if you read his papers, you will never see a lot of mathematical jargon in his paper. His ability is not to be a mathematical wizard. He was never a mathematical wizard. His ability, the reason that makes him Suskind, is that he has some unmatchable insight into physics,
Right.
right? So what
Hmm.
he will do is that he will write a paper, and it may not be a very long paper, but
Hmm.
the insight in that paper will be so good, and
Hmm.
that's what made him famous. That
Right.
he was never a mathematical wizard. So Susskind is a
Hmm.
great example for a string
Hmm.
theory researcher who doesn't abstract, unnecessarily.
Hmm.
And there are other people. For example, take the example of Nimar Kani Hamid. I don't know if people will call him a
Hmm.
string theory researcher, but his work is very mathematical because he
Hmm.
collaborates with mathematicians, and he's trying to
Right.
understand how to get
Hmm.
the answers to scattering processes using some mathematical structures. There
Hmm.
he will need to abstract a lot because he's using some mathematical structures which were studied by mathematicians in the 60s, for example. So there are different people, and they're working on different problems. So sometimes you need to abstract a lot. Sometimes the nature of the problem itself needs you to abstract a lot. For example, if you're working on generalized symmetries, the mathematics needed for some problems in generalized symmetries is a lot. I mean, you have to understand category theory, you have to understand fusion categories, for example. So if you are a generalized symmetries researcher, you will need to abstract a lot. And
Hmm.
sometimes you will see papers where there are some parts of the papers of that paper which would be like um, um, what's the word for it? Formalism heavy and
Hmm.
mathematics heavy and filled with jargon. But some parts of those papers will be calculation heavy. So you're just doing a calculation. For example, my own advisor, he works on generalized symmetries, and he collaborates with people. And some of the papers that he has written with other people have parts where other people, that he collaborated with, are good at abstracting and
Hmm.
putting the formalism on good footing. And then his part was to do long calculations. So in a single paper, you will see two different styles sometimes. So it's not true that string theory researchers as a monolith do abstraction, because there are different people who have different styles. Sometimes there are different problems that require abstractions. Sometimes problems don't require abstractions, and so on.
Right. And coming to Phymaths, what motivated you to start that channel initially?
Um, so if you talk about the channel, I think the channel has been there since 2018, I would say. And
Hmm.
I would say that I just wanted to teach. So
Yeah, I think you
the channel
started with
started.
some tutorials in Hindi and Urdu, right? Hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I started that channel as a channel where I would talk about quantum field theory because I loved quantum
Hmm.
field theory. I still love it.
Hmm.
So I wanted to teach quantum field theory, right?
Hmm.
So, and I knew that there are no lectures or even videos on quantum field theory in Hindi and Urdu. So I started, by, making videos on quantum field theory. But
Hmm.
at that time, I was not very careful about it, and I just, the video production quality was not very good, and even the sound quality was not very good. So I just started as with the tools I had. But then year after year, I decided that I should make the videos better, because it was never a full time. It's still not a full time job for me. It's not a job. I mean, I don't make money out of it. So it's still not a job. So I was not very serious about it. But when COVID came in 2020, at that time I wanted to talk to people because we were in quarantine. So then I started this podcast, Phymaths Podcast, because I wanted to know which people are doing good work, and I just wanted to talk to them.
Hmm.
So again, I started my podcast, as a Hindi podcast, and I talked to some people, who I knew, and then those people referred me to some other people. I invited them. I tried to get some like well-known people from
Yeah,
like
because I don't think
Pakistan
like
in
there
the
is any more. Yeah, there is very eminent personalities that are left over for your podcast. And, like whoever has like very visionary contemporaries in the field, like you have all of them featured on your podcast. I think just looking for when you'll have your podcast with Ed Witton or Ashok
But
or
that's not going to happen.
why not?
Edwin doesn't go on podcasts. So
Hmm.
I talked to him about it, and he said that he
Oh,
doesn't go on podcasts,
oh,
and which is
maybe.
true. He doesn't.
I think we can try to expect a podcast with you and Terence Tao maybe one day.
Some people asked me to do that, but
Hmm.
they said that if he can go on Lex Friedman, I was like, Lex Friedman has a big, although I don't like him, but I think he has a big platform. But still, I can try to do that later, surely. I mean, there's no harm in trying. So initially, what happened is that I was doing these podcasts in Hindi and Urdu. So I
Hmm.
try to get people who will be willing to talk to me in Hindi and Urdu because,
Hmm.
and I'm from Pakistan, so I tried to get people from Pakistan, and there were some powerful people that came on my podcast. For example, for example, in India you have UGC, University Grants
Hmm.
Commission, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So there used to be a UGC in Pakistan as well, but it was renamed to HEC in 2001, I would say, or
Right.
2000 probably.
Hmm.
So the chairperson of HEC appeared on my podcast twice, and we did talk to him. Another person who came to my podcast was I don't like him now, but he was the first chairperson of HEC, and a lot of people don't like him because they think that he kind of instilled procedures in the in the academia which are still there. But I just still wanted to talk to him because I wanted to know how his journey was. But then what happened is that some people were telling me that you should start a podcast in English, and I thought that okay, I should make an extra channel for that, and I should make
Hmm.
podcasts in English.
Hmm.
I was going to do that, but then in 2023, it was I think 26th of August, because 26th of August is the birthday of Ed Witten. So
Hmm.
I think some days before that, I said, okay, let me make a video on the works of Edward Witten because there is no
Yeah.
video on YouTube that talks
Hmm.
about his works. So when I made that video, that got a lot of views, like
Yeah.
200,000 views. So after that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make this channel an English channel, which was a hard decision to take because I was like, okay, my audience is not expecting me to produce English content, and I have a single channel on which I will have content in two
Hmm.
languages, so that's kind of hard. But I just took the leap and I said, okay, I'm gonna make this channel an English channel. And after that, I was like, okay, let's start podcasts in English as well. So then
Hmm.
I started to call people, and when you call people, some people are not willing to come, some people are willing to come. So I just call people who are willing to come.
Right. So, is there some constructive criticism of string theory that you would like to point out?
I think one thing that I would say is that um, in the 80s, but surely in the 2000s, I think
Hmm.
when people say that some claims were being made about the prospects of string theory, which were overhyped, I think they're not wrong.
Hmm.
Some claims were made about, but I think what happened is that at that time we didn't know
Hmm.
what we know now about string theory.
Hmm.
So if and one more thing that I would say is that the people who were making these claims, for example, Brian Greene, who is personally
Hmm.
my hero, they were excited about this, and they didn't gauge their excitation. They shouldn't have they should have gauged their excitation and keep it in check. They should have at least they should have told people a nuanced perspective. They should have told that, well, we don't know this yet, but we are
Hmm.
excited about this. But I mean, some of the documentaries of Brian Greene, if you see, I mean, I saw them when I was a teenager. It seems to be the case that yeah, it's all done. String theory is the future, so they shouldn't have done that. And
Hmm.
I don't even get me started on Michio Kaku. I mean, he did a lot of stuff like that. He totally lacked nuance in his rhetoric about string theory. So when people criticize these popular science practices, I agree that yeah, they should have been more careful.
You know,
That's
like
the only thing that I can think of.
mm, your views on people like Sabine, who, I don't know what they have a very personal take towards string theory.
I don't take her seriously. I think the only reason why I talk about her is that a lot of people watch her. Otherwise, I wouldn't talk about her. I mean, she is not. I mean, the thing is that okay. So let's go to like 2000s. At that time, the most fierce critics of string theory were Lee Smolin and Peter Voigt, right? I
Hmm.
think those people, although I don't like Peter
Hmm.
Voigt, I do respect Lee Smolin though. Those
Hmm.
people were like infinitely better than the critics of string theory today. For example, Sabine
Hmm.
Hausenfelder and Eric Weinstein, because
Hmm.
those people never said that all of science is bad and all of these people who are trying to do
Hmm.
string theory, they are just eating, the public tax money and trying to get funding, and that's it. They never said that. Their criticism was on string theory and string theorists too, of course. But
Right.
the criticism that came from those people, and you can even include Roger Penrose, because in
Hmm.
his book Road to Reality, he did criticize string theory. So those people, as critics, I respect them much more than the people who are doing the string theory criticism today, because it's not about just string theory. It's about all of science. It's about academia as general. And
Right.
for example, take Sabine Hausenfelder. She's a physicist. If she criticizes string theory, one can listen to her because she, I don't know if I can say that if she is still a physicist, but she was a physicist at least, right?
Hmm.
She may still be a physicist, by the way, but she doesn't stick to physics. She talks
Right.
about all of science, and she's not an expert in everything. She will say that scientists are eating your grant money, or scientists are eating public tax money, and I don't trust scientists. And she doesn't have any credibility to say something like that.
Right. So, if you could go back in time and fix something from your past, what would it be and why?
I would not buy a smartphone.
Why is that?
Yes, because until 2016 was one of the best years of my life. I mean, I learned so much in 2016. I learned quantum field theory and general relativity and nuclear physics and classical electrodynamics, all of them in 2016 on my own, because the
Hmm.
teachers were not that good. Some of the teachers, and these subjects were above the class in which I was.
Hmm.
But 2017, so that year kind of started a downfall, I would say, in my studies, because I got a smartphone. And I think
Right.
smartphone is a problem. It has also given me a lot of good things. For example, it has given me access to social media and YouTube. I could learn a lot of things, of course.
Hmm.
I mean, for example, when I was in A levels, which is equivalent of 11th and 12th grade, but the
Hmm.
syllabus comes from Cambridge University. So when I was in A levels, I learned a lot of things on my own, and none of the people in my family had a smartphone. So I had to learn things on a very small, Symbian phone, and on a data package. We didn't have Wi-Fi, and it was very hard, but I think it was
Hmm.
worth it, because
Right.
I was not addicted to social media. And the thing
Hmm.
is that smartphone is a problem. As soon as I got access to smartphone and unfiltered access to social media, that's a problem. So
Hmm.
if I could go back, I would say don't get a smartphone. That's what I would say.
It's a very different answer that I've got in all my podcasts. So we're almost nearing to the end of the podcast. So what is your one final advice for all the students who are willing to pursue science, irrespective of which domain they want to go for?
I would just remember why you're doing it. And one more thing I would say is that um, you should, if you're really trying to make science your career, you have to ask yourself the question that are you a science enthusiast, and is
Hmm.
that why you are trying to make science your career? Because if you're a science enthusiast, you can go in any other field and still read enough science to quench your thirst about science. But making science your career is a totally different thing,
Hmm.
because of all the funding cuts which are going on in science right now, and other anti-science propaganda which is going on social media. It's making very hard to exist as a scientist, because sometimes may not get jobs, and you may not get funding, you may not be able to sustain yourself. you may not be able to make ends meet, right? So if you really, the only reason why you should come to science or in academia as a career is that you really want to do it. If you think that you want to do business, for example, but you're also very interested in science, I would say just go to a business, right, and make money, and you can contribute to science by donating money because we need money to do science, right?
Right.
So, for example, take the example of Jim Simons. Now, Jim Simons was a very well-known mathematician, right?
Quant
But
finance.
he
Yeah, I
went to
was actually
finance.
about to talk about that.
Sure, and he made I think arguably one of the most successful hedge funds in the world, and I think his contribution to science after he left academia, if they're not better, at least they are on par with his contributions as a mathematician. I mean, he has funded Simon Center, he has funded Quantum Magazine, he has funded Archive. I mean, he has funded all the scientists in Brookhaven lab when the 2008 financial crisis happened. All the salaries of Brookhaven were paid by Simon. That's
Right.
something big, right? So if you think that you want to contribute to the development of science, if you are a big businessman, you can contribute to science by with giving
Right.
you money, right?
Yeah. So thank you so much, Hassan. We are done with the questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.